London house prices have plunged by nearly 15% in some areas, while buyers in Manchester are suddenly walking away from deals they would have fought over just a year ago. Across the UK, whispers of a housing market collapse are getting louder. Are we standing on the edge of another financial disaster? Think about it. For many, a home isn't just bricks and mortar, it's their life savings, their retirement plan, their family's future. Yet every day, new data suggests the ground beneath the market is shifting. Could the dream of stability turn into a nightmare of falling prices, rising debt, and broken plans? Stay with me, because what's happening now may change the way you see your home forever. Number 1. What's happening across the UK? Across the United Kingdom, the housing crisis is unfolding in different ways depending on the city, yet the story feels eerily similar no matter where you look. In London, the market has cooled sharply, with once untouchable prime properties in Kensington or Chelsea suddenly dropping in value as international investors pull out, spooked by rising interest rates and global uncertainty. For everyday Londoners, the problem isn't that homes are cheap, it's that they're still staggeringly overpriced compared to wages, leaving families crushed by mortgage repayments or renting at levels that devour half their income. Shift north to Manchester, and the narrative shifts from ownership to renting. Here, the rental market has exploded as first-time buyers are priced out, creating intense competition for flats and leaving younger residents scrambling for security. Developers rushed in to build new apartment blocks, but as borrowing costs climb, many projects in central Manchester are being put on pause, leaving half-finished sites scattered across the city. Birmingham tells a similar story. Despite strong demand, interest rate hikes have forced many would-be buyers to sit on the sidelines, uncertain whether to lock into high mortgage payments or wait for a crash that might never come. In Scotland, cities like Glasgow and Edinburgh are showing a slowdown in what had been steady growth. Rising borrowing costs are biting hard here too, and local families are struggling to keep up with higher bills just as energy and food inflation eat into every paycheck. Meanwhile, in Leeds and Liverpool, optimism from new developments and regeneration projects is fading, as construction firms delay timelines and small landlords quietly exit the market. The common thread running through all these cities is one of anxiety. Homes that once symbolized stability are now causing deep uncertainty. Families are delaying milestones, like retirement or starting a family, because they cannot predict where the housing market will be in 5 years. Parents in Manchester worry about whether their children will ever be able to buy, while older homeowners in Edinburgh wonder if selling now means losing decades of value. These city stories, when pieced together, paint a national picture of fragility in the UK housing system, one where geography shapes the details, but the pressure of interest rates, inflation, and stagnant wages cuts across every postcode, making housing not just a financial concern, but a daily weight on the lives of millions. Number 2. Hidden factors driving the collapse. Beneath the headlines of falling prices and slowing sales lies a set of hidden forces quietly reshaping the UK housing market, and together they are creating a pressure cooker that is pushing households in every direction. At the core is the Bank of England's cycle of interest rate hikes, introduced to tame inflation but with a devastating side effect. Mortgages that were once manageable are now swallowing up half or more of a household's income. Families in cities like Birmingham and Leeds who locked into low rates just a few years ago now face renewal at nearly double the cost, leaving many wondering if they should sell before it gets worse. Layered on top of this is the relentless rise in everyday costs. Inflation may appear to be cooling on paper, but the lived experience in Manchester or Glasgow tells a different story. Food prices remain stubbornly high, utility bills eat away at savings, and fuel costs make commuting more expensive than ever. These financial strains directly reduce what households can put toward rent or mortgages, pulling the entire market downward. Another overlooked factor is the role of social media and cultural expectations, which constantly amplify the message that property is the ultimate marker of success. Platforms flood people with stories of quick profits, flipping homes, or building passive rental income, yet the reality for many in Liverpool or Edinburgh is starkly different. They are chasing an illusion while struggling to hold on to a single property. This social pressure creates risky decisions, from overstretching on mortgages to over-leveraging small rental portfolios, which then collapse when the market turns. Meanwhile, developers and investors who once flooded into regeneration projects in Manchester or central London are retreating, spooked not only by higher borrowing costs but also by uncertainty over government housing policies, leaving behind empty cranes and abandoned construction sites that symbolize fading confidence. The result of these hidden drivers is a housing environment that feels increasingly unstable, where ordinary people pay the price of global economic forces far beyond their control. It's not just about whether a house in Edinburgh is worth £20,000 less than last year. It's about whether families can sleep at night, whether they can plan for retirement, and whether the next generation can hope for a future that includes the security of a home. The collapse, if it continues, will not appear in one dramatic moment but in the slow erosion of stability across every household in the UK. Number 3. The human impact. Behind every statistic about falling prices or rising interest rates lies a deeply personal story, and it is in these stories that the true cost of the housing crisis becomes clear. In London, families who once stretched themselves to the limit to secure a modest home are now being forced to downsize, selling properties they thought would be their forever homes because monthly repayments have become impossible. These moves are not driven by choice, but by survival, and the emotional toll is immense. Children uprooted from schools, parents sacrificing time with family to work extra hours, and entire support systems disrupted. In Manchester, younger professionals who once believed that the city's booming economy would secure their futures now find themselves stuck in a cycle of endless renting. They see their pay swallowed by landlords while their dreams of ownership drift further out of reach. For many, this has fostered a quiet resignation, a sense that homeownership is no longer a milestone worth striving for. Meanwhile, in Scotland, older couples in Edinburgh or Glasgow face a different heartbreak. After decades of carefully paying off their homes, they had hoped to sell and use the equity to fund retirement or to help their children. But with the market slowing and buyers hesitant, these homes sit unsold, their value slipping just when it is needed most. Retirement plans are delayed, medical care postponed, and a lifetime of sacrifice feels like it was built on shifting sand. In Birmingham and Leeds, the frustration takes on a generational edge. Young buyers, already squeezed by stagnant wages and rising costs, are walking away from the idea of ownership entirely, focusing instead on survival in the present rather than dreams of the future. The result is not just financial strain, but emotional fatigue, stress-related illnesses, sleepless nights, and a growing sense of hopelessness that permeates households. What makes this crisis so heavy is that it cannot be measured in charts or percentages. It shows up in the anxious glance of parents counting bills at the kitchen table, in the frustration of a 30-something professional still living in shared housing, and in the quiet despair of retirees watching their life's work lose value. This is why the housing market collapse is not merely an economic event, it is a human story, one of lives disrupted, plans broken, and communities shaken. Number 4. Mortgage pressure. One of the sharpest and most immediate blows of the UK housing crisis is the relentless rise in mortgage costs, a pressure that is reshaping daily life for countless families. In cities like Birmingham and Bristol, households that once budgeted carefully to make ends meet are now facing repayments that have doubled almost overnight. A family that secured a 3-bedroom semi-detached home in Birmingham 5 years ago might have locked into a fixed-rate mortgage at just under 2%, paying around £900 a month. Now, as that deal expires and they're forced to remortgage at rates closer to 6%, their monthly payment can easily climb above £1,800. This isn't a small adjustment. It's the equivalent of adding another full set of household bills on top of everything else, leaving families scrambling to cut corners wherever they can. Parents are canceling after-school activities for their children, delaying car repairs, or taking on second jobs just to cover the basics. In Bristol, where housing demand remains strong but incomes have not kept pace, even middle-class families who once felt secure are suddenly calculating every purchase, from groceries to utility usage, with anxiety hanging over every decision. The real weight of these financial shifts goes beyond the numbers. It seeps into the way people live and work. Mortgage stress does not clock out at 9 a.m. when someone begins their workday. It follows them into the office, drains focus from meetings, and chips away at productivity just as effectively as social media distractions or constant digital notifications. People describe lying awake at night replaying calculations in their head. How many more months can we last at this rate? What happens if I lose my job? What if interest rates climb again? And then dragging that exhaustion into the next day. This cycle erodes not just financial stability but also mental clarity, emotional resilience, and the ability to be fully present with loved ones. Over time, it creates a compounding effect: lower productivity at work, strained relationships at home, and health issues born from chronic stress. Mortgage pressure, once a technical issue buried in financial columns, has become a lived reality that touches every part of life. For families in Birmingham, Bristol, and across the UK, the housing crisis isn't an abstract debate. It is a daily battle against rising costs that threaten not just their homes, but their stability, well-being, and ability to plan for the future. Number 5. Rental chaos. For tenants across the UK, the rental market has become a suffocating trap, where choices shrink while costs spiral upward. In London, average rents have surged to record highs, with even modest one-bedroom flats consuming well over half of a typical salary. This squeeze is pushing renters into overcrowded conditions, long commutes from distant boroughs, or constant moves as landlords hike prices beyond reach. Leeds, once considered a more affordable alternative, is now seeing similar patterns, as demand far outpaces supply. Students and young professionals compete fiercely for limited properties, often forced to pay inflated rents for small, poorly maintained spaces. Edinburgh faces a different twist. While the city boasts rows of gleaming luxury flats left vacant by investors or short-term holiday lets, ordinary residents struggle to secure affordable long-term housing. This mismatch between what is built and what people actually need creates a daily frustration that weighs heavily on tenants' well-being. Renting stress is not just about money. It eats away at mental bandwidth in the same way that poor time management habits drain focus and energy. Tenants describe endless hours spent searching property sites, attending viewings, and negotiating with landlords, only to start the process again when contracts end or rents rise. The constant uncertainty leaves people feeling as though their lives are on hold, unable to plan families, careers, or even simple routines because their housing situation feels so unstable. Just as digital distractions pull attention away from meaningful tasks, the rental crisis chips away at mental clarity, leaving people anxious, distracted, and exhausted. For renters in London, Leeds, and Edinburgh, housing is no longer a foundation for stability. It is a relentless source of stress that shapes every decision, from where to work to how to spend precious free time. Number 6. The supply problem. One of the most glaring contradictions in the UK housing market is the widening gap between what is being built and what people can actually afford. In cities like Glasgow, Liverpool, and Newcastle, construction sites that once buzzed with activity are slowing to a crawl as developers face rising material costs, higher borrowing rates, and dwindling buyer confidence. Projects are announced with optimism, foundations are laid, and cranes a skyline, but many of these developments stall halfway, leaving skeletal frames that symbolize promises unfulfilled. Even when projects are completed, the story does not always end well. Rows of new-build flats often sit dark and lifeless, unsold or unrented, because the asking prices far exceed what local residents can manage. These so-called ghost homes give the illusion of progress while failing to meet the real needs of working families in those cities. It is a supply problem that isn't about numbers alone, but about mismatched priorities. Luxury apartments marketed to investors abroad while young professionals in Liverpool or Newcastle can barely find affordable starter homes. The situation mirrors a productivity trap familiar to anyone who has juggled too many tasks at once. Like starting 10 projects but finishing none, the housing sector looks busy on the surface, yet produces little of lasting value. For residents, the frustration grows as they watch empty flats rise across their neighborhoods while their own housing struggles remain unresolved. The imbalance leaves communities in limbo, where the physical presence of half-built towers or unlit apartment blocks serves as a daily reminder that the housing system is not designed with them in mind. In the end, these construction slowdowns and ghost homes represent not just wasted resources, but a deeper failure to align supply with genuine human need. Number 7. Hidden signs of collapse. While national headlines tend to focus on broad averages and market predictions, the real warning signs of collapse are often found in the quieter details unfolding at the local level. In Sheffield and Nottingham, repossessions are beginning to climb steadily, with families unable to keep pace as mortgage payments consume larger portions of their income. These repossessions don't happen overnight. They are the end result of months of stress, sleepless nights, and difficult decisions, finally culminating in the loss of a home that was once a symbol of security. Meanwhile, in the suburbs just outside London and Manchester, a different signal is flashing, a sudden surge of for sale boards lining residential streets. At first glance, this might look like a normal seasonal uptick in activity, but residents know better. Many of these homes are being offloaded under pressure, as households rush to sell before rising rates or falling values push them deeper into trouble. Together, these small shifts create a mosaic of unease, the kind of early symptoms that reveal a deeper sickness in the system. It is not unlike ignoring warning signs in health, brushing off fatigue or recurring pain only to find a much larger illness later on. The housing market works in the same way. When repossessions rise and for sale signs multiply, they are signals of strain that should not be dismissed. Left unchecked, these early indicators can snowball into a larger crisis, undermining confidence and accelerating the very collapse people fear. For those watching closely, Sheffield's repossessions and Manchester's suburban sell-offs are not isolated stories but interconnected clues pointing toward a fragile foundation. They remind us that the health of the housing market is not measured only in official reports but in the lived realities of people quietly losing their homes or being forced to cash out too soon. Number 8. Future Outlook. Is there hope? Despite the mounting pressure across the UK housing market, it would be misleading to say the outlook is entirely bleak. In fact, there are signs, small but significant, that point to the potential for stability in the years ahead. Government measures are already being discussed, including targeted schemes to support first-time buyers and incentives for developers to shift focus from luxury flats toward genuinely affordable housing. The Bank of England, while still cautious, faces growing pressure to ease interest rates if inflation continues to cool, a move that could provide some relief to families currently struggling with mortgages in Birmingham, Bristol, and beyond. At the same time, regeneration projects in cities like Leeds and Manchester hold promise for creating new opportunities, with investment flowing into infrastructure, transport links, and mixed-use developments that could restore some balance between supply and demand. Yet optimism must be tempered with realism. Global economic uncertainty, ongoing construction slowdowns, and the lingering effects of inflation will not disappear overnight. For many households in Glasgow or Liverpool, any improvements may feel slow to arrive, especially if wages fail to catch up with housing costs. The real question is whether these positive steps will be enough to counteract years of deep-rooted imbalance. Will the regeneration projects and potential rate cuts truly help families reclaim stability, or are we looking at the beginning of a lost decade where homeownership slips even further out of reach? The answer may depend less on sweeping national policies and more on how effectively change filters down to individual households, ensuring that ordinary people, not just investors, feel the benefits. For now, hope remains possible, but it rests on fragile foundations, and the path forward will demand resilience from both policymakers and the millions of families who continue to bear the weight of an uncertain housing market. Number 9. Practical advice. When the housing market feels unstable, the key is not to panic but to take practical steps that protect your position and give you breathing room. For homeowners, the main priority is safeguarding against sudden drops in property value. That means resisting the temptation to overextend with risky renovations or additional borrowing, and instead focusing on strengthening financial resilience, building savings buffers, locking in the best possible mortgage deals, and keeping an eye on local trends in your area, whether that's London, Leeds, or Glasgow. Renters face a different challenge, as skyrocketing rents and tight supply make it easy to feel trapped. Yet there are strategies available. Negotiating longer contracts to avoid sudden increases, exploring rental options just outside city centers where competition is less fierce, and prioritizing housing choices that reduce stress rather than amplify it. Protecting mental health is just as important as protecting your wallet, because the constant anxiety of uncertain rent payments can drain time, focus, and productivity in the same way that poor digital habits steal attention. For investors, the lesson is to avoid being lured into speculative traps, particularly in overheated areas where shiny new developments mask a lack of real demand. Instead, focus on fundamentals: steady rental yields, long-term stability in cities with strong employment bases like Birmingham or Manchester, and avoiding short-term gambles that could backfire if the market tilts downward. Ultimately, the housing crisis may feel overwhelming, but by focusing on clear, grounded actions, whether you're paying a mortgage, searching for a rental, or building a portfolio, you can regain some control in an environment that often feels dictated by forces far beyond your reach. The advice is simple: act with caution, think long-term, and prioritize stability over risk. At the end of the day, the housing market isn't just about numbers. It's about how secure we feel in our homes, our families, and our future. I'd love to hear from you. Are you in Manchester, London, or Glasgow? What changes are you seeing where you live? While you're here, check out our previous video for more insights, and please support us by subscribing. It's just one click, but it means the world to us after all the effort we put into bringing you these breakdowns.